All right, and I'll go ahead and get started. So again, my name is Alexa Torchinowicz. I am Systems and Cataloging Librarian at Davidson College. And I'm going to be talking about how Davidson has been using APIs in various projects and our daily workflows post-migration with the help of a few tools. So just a little bit of background. Davidson College is a small liberal arts college in Davidson, North Carolina. We're just north of Charlotte, and we migrated from WMS to Alma and Primo VE in June of 2019. Our migration was very quick, but it was not exactly painless. So there was, and definitely still is, quite a bit of work to do post-migration, but that's pretty standard with any migration. You're going to have some post-migration cleanup. What we've noticed is that much of the work revolved around our bib holdings and items data. And some of that data can be taken care of with various jobs in Alma, but not every data field is available through those jobs. And what I really needed was the ability to add or manipulate unique data for individual records, but at a very large scale. If this is the case, and if you go to the Ex Libris documentation or various listservs or even support portals, Ex Libris often directs users towards an API solution. And while that's great, all right, I have a solution, but if you were like me and not very familiar with what that even meant, well, what do you even do with that? So let's do a quick API overview. First, we'll start with some of the acronyms. REST stands for Representational State Transfer, and it's really referring to the style or the architecture. And then API stands for Application Programming Interface, and it is the communication between 2 points. So when you are using APIs, you will need to have an API key, and you get these through Ex Libris's Developers Network. They are unique and they grant access to certain information. So there you can have access to just bibliographic information. You can have access to just users. You can also set them with permissions. So for example, you can have them be read-only, or you can have them give write access. They have various functions or methods, get, put, post, and delete. And what that means is that they can retrieve, update, create, or delete resources. And now Ex Libris uses web APIs, so when you kind of use an API with the various data points, it kind of mashes all together and looks like a URL. So I have the example here in my slide where you would input, so this one is for calling up holdings data. You would just input an MMS ID and then tag on your API key at the end. And if you pop that into a URL, you would get your data. So you can see that the Ex Libris has APIs throughout Alma and Primo, but then also many of their other products. And you have probably either already have used the APIs during your migration, or you are already using them if you are post-migration. You can use APIs, you've probably heard of the ordering APIs, your vendor APIs when you load vendor data. As was mentioned earlier, the users have an API, so you can load or delete user data through an API. You can print your spine labels and even use them for self-check machines. So you can see that APIs cover a huge area of the Ex Libris products. So I needed to focus specifically on just the bib API. So this is an area of APIs that only allows access to bibs, holdings, and items data. Portfolios, loans, requests, collections, representations, reminders, and authorities. So this still covers a huge area of Alma. So again, narrowing it down, what I'm going to be focusing on today is just going to be the top 3 points, just the bib, holdings, and items data. So in the image is the output of an API. So like I mentioned, just popping in that URL into a browser, you can pull up your data, and this will show you all of the fields which are available for you to edit through an API. So you can see there's, we have it sectioned off into the bib is the top section, holdings is right in the middle. You get a little bit of the item data, but that keeps going on past the image. And so any of those kind of sections can be edited with an API. Now, it's great that I can call up all of these different levels of data at once, but I need to edit hundreds, thousands, or even sometimes tens of thousands of records, and each one may need to be edited differently than the other. So if I want my API to act on multiple records, I need to then code something around an API so that it can act on them. Now I have some experience in a few scripting languages, but after migration, I was honestly not interested in writing several programs for our various issues from scratch. So this led me to look elsewhere for applications that maybe others were using for kind of similar instances that I was seeing. And luckily for me, there have been plenty of solutions already developed by people out there in the Ex Libris community using APIs to edit records at scale. And I will be talking specifically about three of them. And they are the Alma Enumerator, what I have been referring to as the update script, and then also Grima. So we will get right into the first one, the Alma Enumerator. So it is a set of Python scripts set to update enumeration and chronology information in Alma. It was developed by Wesley Teal for the Wartburg College Library's 2016 migration. And what happened with their migration, as was similar to our migration and maybe even yours, was that volume designations, so, volume 1, number 2 from 1988, everything was just thrown into the description field in the item record. So in the image on the left, you can see that under the description color, and these are all my items for the Literary Digest. I have 106 individual item records. So the description is filled with, volume 16, the dates, but nothing is in the year or volume fields. And now this causes issues with availability in Alma. So when you're just searching in Alma and you get a record come up, the availability is either skewed or not available for you to see easily. But most importantly is that it messes with the usability on the patron side or on the Primo side. So in the image on the right, you can see that users would be unable to filter by volume or year because that information just isn't there in the holdings for our physical materials. And they would just have to either keep clicking through show more items, or they would just end up giving up before they got to their desired volume. So what the Alma Enumerator does is it takes an MMS ID and calls up all of the items that would be associated under that MMS ID. So everything that would be associated through holdings, and then every item underneath of those holdings. It then parses out the data from the description field. So in the image on the top, in the description field, I have volume 118, 1934. It would take that, crunch it out into the separate volume and date, and then put it into the correct enumeration and chronology fields into the item record. It has a very simple user interface. You can see on the bottom left. You would just pop in your MMS ID and then pop in the API key to update any item records that would under that MMS ID. And then if you would like to, you can also run it with a list of MMS IDs. So that's what I'm showing in the bottom right, and that list goes on and on and on. You can use the batch process from the command line to edit a run of MMS IDs. And in order to use Alma Enumerator, it's very simple. You only need very minimal understanding of Python in order to edit the script and then to run it. All right, so next up is what I've been referring to as the update script. It was developed by Nazzareno Badini from the University of Pisa. It is a PHP script originally written to update call numbers and using barcodes. So popping in a barcode, giving a new call number, and then just having it update the call numbers that way. What is so great about this script is that it can be easily modified, and others have actually presented on this. Someone from Igloo, I guess about 2 years ago, presented on how you could use MMS IDs rather than barcodes, so it can be modified that way. It can also be modified to really update any field that would come up in the bib API. So if you needed to, instead of updating call numbers from the holdings record, you can, any field that was in the items record, you could script it to change that for you. Also, it uses a very simple CSV file as its input, and libraries just love their CSV files. They love tabular data. As you can see in the images below, when I was putting together this presentation, I happen to have two tabular data and CSV files open, so it's everywhere, and it's very easy to get. Most systems will export data as CSV. You can also pull data out of analytics in CSV, so it's just easy to get. So what we've at Davidson have been using the update script for is several different things. First, since we were using it for a couple of different things, we made a little index, and since it's PHP, it's run through a web browser. So you can see in the top left, we've got a little index that has buttons that we would just click and have the script run. So we use the original change call number script for our conversion of our Dewey collection. So Davidson has a split collection. Some things are still in Dewey, but we're converting them as they come in to our Library of Congress. So kind of as they get checked out from our Dewey collection, when they come back in, we kind of just put together the CSV file, which is the middle picture with just a barcode and our new Library of Congress call number, and just run the script and have them convert to the new Library of Congress call number. We have also used it to add our storage locations, and it has been instrumental in this. Our rare books materials had a lot of information in another database, and it did not come over during migration. We were able to convert some of the information from the other database to MARC and then merge that with bib records, but a lot of what was in the outside database was really item specific, and so it needed to go into the item record. And one of those things was storage location. So is it in cabinet AA? Is it in cabinet B4, et cetera, et cetera. So we pulled that data from the other database, and of course it was exported as CSV, so very simple. We just modified the scripts to include storage location, because that's where we decided in the item record we were going to put this data. So we just popped that in there, cleaned up the CSV a little bit, and then was able to add storage location to about 1,300 plus or minus records. So very quick, very easy. Another project which we've kind of just started working on is to use the script to clean up our internal notes in our item records. So during migration, we just chunked a lot of our extra data into one kind of field and then threw it all into the internal notes field in our item records. And while that was okay then, we thought we would kind of revisit it, but it was kind of left on the back burner. So now, once it's been a bit after migration, we've started doing a little bit of weeding or a little bit of moving of materials, and we want to put notes and withdrawn notes in the internal notes field. So when we're trying to add these fields, we have rediscovered this kind of data that is clogging up our internal notes. But what we can do with the update script is we can pull all of these notes from analytics, clean it up a little bit using your preferred method, either OpenRefined or Excel or whatever, or scripting that. And then you can update the new notes with the update script. And it's a tiny bit more advanced than the Alma Enumerator, in that you would need a web server environment like Apache to run it, and a little bit of knowledge of PHP to edit the script. But really, if you have experience in any kind of programming language, it shouldn't be too hard for you to pick up. Okay. And going with the last kind of tool is Grima, which is developed by Catherine Labarger at the University of Kentucky, and it is used to speed up various cataloging tasks in Alma. And much like the update script, it is also written in PHP and run from a web server, so access through a web browser. As you can see on the left is a screenshot of the web browser with all the different links to the various tasks that you can use with Grima. Now, it makes these tasks, which can normally be very clicky, very circular in Alma, much easier and much less fussy. And since it is in a web, it uses a web form to access data and to input data. It's very familiar to users, whereas in Alma, the logic behind the workflow is very hard to understand. All right, so looking at Grima, it is easy to write. So you can see in the top image, that is the PHP code behind one Grima, one individual Grima. And it's very short and sweet. I mean, there's just a couple lines in there that are action notes. And then every Grima, every PHP file comes with an accompanying XML file that just specifies input. That's not shown here. But it creates an easy user interface, which is at the bottom. So you can see it's just, pop in, and if I'm changing an item location, just pop in the location code, and the barcode, hit submit, and it's done, rather than, moving things, clicking things and moving things and searching things in Alma to try and do the same thing. So the other tools that I have discussed were largely project-based. I needed to put in data from the data migration. I need to clean up migration data, but Grima can be used for your day-to-day work. It can also be open and running right alongside Alma, since you can access it on a web browser. And it also does not interfere with Alma, because a lot of times if you have multiple browser windows open of Alma, some things go wrong, the caching and the cookies and whatnot. It just doesn't work so well. But you can have Grima open right next to your Alma browser. Grima is also still very new to us. It's a new adventure, so we haven't explored its full potential. But luckily for me, our archive, special collections, and community team has been willing to test out some of the Grimas. They've been working on moving materials from various locations like our stacks or permanent reserves or our Davidsoniana room into either the rare book room or their special collections. They're wanting to either preserve special materials, or they want to create complete sets of our Davidson publications to hold in perpetuity. So instead of either giving these materials to me just so I can change the location, and instead of them trying to wade into Alma and just try to figure out all the different workflows for maybe one thing, the librarians have simply been using Grima to get these locations moved. And all they do is just pop in the location, pop in the barcode, and they're done. And kind of on a grading scale, Grima is one step up from the update script as far as implementation goes, but it's very similar. So all you need is also still a web server environment. You will need knowledge of PHP, the additional knowledge of XML, although the scripts for PHP and XML are very easy, very simple to use in Grima. They're very simple. And you would just need to be, and then that's really just for the setup. In order to use Grima, you can see the image on that bottom left. It's just, you just need to be familiar with filling out a web form in your browser. All right. So I am at the point where I have some resources here for you to get started on the various tools that I have talked about today.
Okay, and we're at the 20-minute mark.
Fantastic. So just wanted to say thank you. Thank you to all of the developers, the ones that I've mentioned here today, and then all of the developers who are working on really, really innovative solutions out there. Thank you to my colleagues for letting me test this stuff out on them, and thank you for listening.
Okay, so first I want to apologize. I forgot to say your bio. I pasted it in the chat for the people who are listening, and apologies.
Oh, that's okay.
But you kind of went through it yourself, so thank you.
Yeah.
Our first question, you want me to just read them to you? Because I think you might want to go back to the appropriate slide.
Sure, yeah, you can read them.
Okay, so the first one is, will Ex Libris charge libraries for each API we add or charge for each unique API key we need?
That's a good question. So as far as I know, no. I have several APIs and I make them, at will. Nobody's sent me an invoice yet. But I'm sure if you ever got to a point where possibly if you're using, I don't even know what the number would be, but I'm going to say no for the answer.
Okay, so why are the input and output files the same in the Alma Enumerator demo?
Oh, good question. Let's see if I can get back to.
Okay, and Leslie Moore is saying in the chat that there is a threshold for API calls.
Okay, yeah. I figured there would be a threshold, but I'm not there yet.
Okay.
All right, so let's see. So input and output. So the input file, or the Alma Enumerator, the individual one, it really doesn't matter. I found you just, because your input is actually what you're inputting into the user interface there. And so when you run it, the output file, I've found when I run it, it doesn't, the output is the kind of results of the parsing data. So the input file doesn't need to be the same, or it can be the same. So your input is that MMS ID, the output, it will show you the parsing data.
Okay, so it's okay that those two fields
it's okay that that's the same thing.
Field.
Yeah, because there is not an existing, I should back up. So there is not an existing output file. When you would go to run this the first time, it creates the output file. So the input file doesn't matter.
Okay. I apologize if this is a silly question, but is there a way to avoid having all year volume information stuck in the description field, or is this a default during migration?
That's a good question. I'm going to say it's, for us, it was a default during migration. And from looking up a couple of other, when I was looking up solutions, it seemed like that was the default for other libraries, that everything was just thrown into the description field for them during their migration. If somebody else has a different experience, you might want to talk to them. But yeah, in my experience, it's that's the default. Everything for everybody goes in the description field.
Okay. Any chance that along with your presentation notes, you could provide some even more basic information about using an Apache server or other options for using these tools? I see great potential, but I'm not sure how to even begin using these tools. And I think you have that then on the final slide.
Yeah, so in the final slide, just points to general resources, but if you need like specifics, like how to put Apache on your computer or how to make sure that you use it, we do have, and if you want to contact me, you can, we do have short documents on how we set up. So like if I need to set this up on somebody else's computer, I have my notes on how to do that. So I can send that to anybody who's interested.
Okay. Great. And I see somebody in the chat has posted the document for the threshold for the APIs.
Excellent.
So for the internal notes on the item records, how is using the update script different than using a change physical item job?
Right. So that would be because our notes, so we want different notes to go into different item records. So if I use the job to change internal notes, that would be a global change. So if I said, change all internal notes to, I don't know, withdrawn 2019, then all of the things in my set would be changed to that note. Whereas I wanted different notes in different item records. So that's where I would need my update script to use.
Okay. The next one is a comment to thank you for explaining the name Grima. We have a lot of unbarcoded items in special collections. Can GRIMA be modified to use MMS IDs or some other input rather than barcodes?
That's a good question. I'm not positive on GRIMA if that's there are some GRIMAs that do use just MMS IDs, so the potential is there to modify it to use just MMS IDs. Definitely on the update script, people have, and I've got a link in my resources page to one of the presentations that did specifically change the update script to use MMS ID because they were missing a lot of barcodes. So yeah, I would say if you're interested in the GRIMA portion of things, that you would definitely want to hit up the original developer about that.
Okay. Can you explain how to use a batch file to change the enum cron? She didn't understand from your description earlier.
Sure, yeah, definitely. I can go back to that slide. Okay, so what you would do is you would need to, so when you get Alma Enumerator, when you download it from the source page from GitHub, there are some, there is a config file, a configuration file, and that would be, you would just tell it, what your text file is, and you would put in your MMS ID in that config, your API key in that config file. And then once you were going to run a list, then you would compile a list of MMS IDs. You could pull that from wherever, analytics, or if you just had a list. And then you would need to, when you were going to run it, you would run it in a command line tool. So what I prefer Anaconda prompt shell, or most computers have a PowerShell or a terminal that you would use. When you're in your command line, you would change directory to wherever you're holding the Alma Enumerator files, and then in the command line, you would just tell it to can't remember what the exact call is, but you would just tell it to run you would tell it to pick up your batch text file and run, and then it would just run on the back end to change all of those, to call up all of those MMS IDs, and then to change your volume enumeration. So it's run on the command line.
Okay. With the Alma Enumerator, have you run into issues with various forms of volume enumeration data in the description as opposed to everything neatly being in, say, volume 18, 1934?
Oh, absolutely, definitely. And so what it'll do is, what's nice about Alma Enumerator is if anything doesn't, so there is, in the script, it has a preset, and you would want to change this to your own unique institution, but it has a preset of what to do when it finds what type of data. So, if it finds something like the one in the description, it knows for that to pull it into volume and to a date. But if there is anything else, like we had, what was it? We had a lot of stuff like the one I showed in our literary digest. So this one actually didn't get run through the Alma Enumerator because it has things like Jan-June, so, or something like spring, or anything that really is other than number data. It has a little bit of an issue with, but what you get is you do get an error report on the output, whether you use the single kind of user interface or whether you use the batch function. You get an error report, and it'll tell you, okay, I couldn't do this one because of this reason. Couldn't tell what the number is. Now there is an ability to edit the Alma Enumerator script so that it can recognize more complex data. I really have not used that. I edited some just because we needed some. Our setup was different than what the original script was. So like I changed slashes to dashes or something like that. But as far as handling more complex data, it does have a hard time with.
Okay, and then last, we had somebody who said that the API threshold, at least based on their contract, there's an outstanding, it might vary by contract, but as far as they know, it's 1,000 times the number of staff users in your contract.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, and that's all we have at the moment in Q&A and chat. A lot of thank yous and some love for the graphics on your slide there. And I think that's it.
All right.
Thank you very much, Alexa. And thank you everybody for attending today. And I'll turn this over to Jill.
I would just like to echo Jen's thanking everyone for attending. This wouldn't really be a conference if no one showed up, even virtually. And I also know that the weather is dicey in other parts of the state and the country. So thank you everyone who's attended. I really want to thank the presenters. We got so many great submissions this year. It was really difficult to pick a program. And the one that we did pick, everyone really really provided some great information, and I know I took a lot away, and I hope everyone else did too. I expect that you did. I want to thank Jen Parker for emceeing all of this, and also the rest of the conference team. A lot of us really believe in this conference, and we like making it free and available to everyone. And as we've mentioned a few times during this conference, we are going to be planning on getting those slides and recordings out very soon, and the recordings will be available. Oh, they'll be available on the SUNYLA website, sunyla.org. Just name checking the conference team: Jennifer DeVito from Stony Brook University, Bill Jones from SUNY Geneseo, who is also the SUNYLA president, Carrie Martin, SUNY Purchase, Jessica McGivney, SUNY Farmingdale, and Jennifer Parker, SUNY Cortland. And one last time, asking you to save the date for SUNYLA 2020. It's June 17th through the 20th at Mohawk Valley Community College in Utica, New York. And that team is currently accepting proposals. So please check that out at sunyla2020.wordpress.com. And also, there will be a little survey going out to everyone who attended. So if you could fill that out, we'd love to hear your feedback, things that you liked about the conference, areas for improvement, and possible ideas for next year. We do this every year. And if you think there's a topic or some type of theme that would work for this, let us know. And thanks again, everyone. It's really been a treat to do this for the past 6 years, and we will see you in 2021.